Hello, everybody. In this video, I'm going to present you an article for the Journal of the Human and Social Science Research. The title of the article is Development of a New Language Learning Motivation Scale for Medical Students. My name is Bora Demir. I'm from Çanakkale 18th Mountain University, and I'm from Turkey. I'm also doing this presentation on behalf of my partner in this study, Bahattin Hamarat. Also, he's from the same university. Okay, let's talk about the motivation of the study. Due to many reasons, like professional development, personal development, or integrative purposes, medical doctors are learning English. There are many reasons, of course, and we were kind of curious about those reasons and wanted to learn the learning motives of medical students, because we believe that learning the motivation is fundamental for language teachers and institutions in designing English for medical purposes courses. The aim of the study is to develop a language learning motivation scale, and that is tailored specifically for medical students learning English as a foreign language in Turkey. Here is the theoretical framework of our study. First of all, I have to mention that it's not based on a single model of motivation, but rather it's a combination of 3 different models, which I'll be talking in a minute. And it's the complex and the multidimensional structure of learning motivation makes this theoretical framework quite difficult for researchers, because we had to kind of mix a number of approaches in this research. So most of the recent proposed models of motivation focus on intrinsic and extrinsic motives. However, the integrative dimension of motivation is usually ignored. However, due to the political, economical, and global changes in Turkey or in the world, people are, changing their countries, moving to another country to find a job, and etc. So people need learning English for integrative reasons as well. So we focused on 3 factors for professional language learning motivation scale: intrinsic motivation, integrative motivation, and extrinsic or instrumental motivation. We consider these quite close to each other, and I'll discuss this later on. So let's make a short definition of motivation. There are various definitions actually in the literature. However, we started with the Ryan and Deci, 2000. A person who feels no impetus or inspiration to act is characterized as unmotivated, whereas someone who is energized or activated to finish a job or to complete a task is considered as motivated. And according to Muir, motivation is central to understanding the reasons of the behaviors of language learners by affecting their engagement and persistence in language learning. And Dernier's definition is quite popular, which is like motivation is one of the major determinants in comprehending the underlying factors for foreign language or second language learning. So there are 3 basic components: the choice of a particular action, the persistence with it, and the effort expended on it. These 3 factors made up the motivational concept of Dernier and Nishioda. So first of all, we started with the socio-educational model. It is divided into 2 sections, like instrumental motivation and integrative motivation. And another discrimination made by Deci and Ryan as intrinsic and extrinsic model. Intrinsic model, doing something because you like it, and extrinsically motivated person, it refers to something because it leads to a separable outcome. So you do it because you're getting an outcome. And actually, we are very close to Noel et al.'s 20,000 model, which is based on 3 different models: intrinsic motives, extrinsic motives, and integrative motives at the same time. So here is a short table about the kind of various models of motivation found in the literature. And in the last column, you can see our studies, framework, intrinsic motivation, instrumental or extrinsic motivation, and integrative motivation. So this is the motivational model of our present research. For intrinsic motivation, we talk about satisfaction or personal development. For instrumental or extrinsic motivation, we refer professional development or getting rewards. And for integrative motivation, we talk about acculturation and communication with people from other cultures. Here is the design of our study. It's a scale development study, and we collected quantitative data, and we call our scale as PLLMS, which is for Professional Language Learning Motivational Scale. So we had 320 students from our university, and here is the gender distribution of the participants. So we started with determining the target motivational concepts to be measured, and we decided, after a long literature review, of course, we decided to base our study on instrumental and integrative motivation from Gardner and Lambert, intrinsic extrinsic model from Noes et al., and L2 learning experience proposed by Dernier. Here is the procedures for the development of the motivation scale. Actually, we followed the directions of De Vallis 2017, and according to De Vallis, first we should determine clearly what it is we want to measure, and after that to generate an item pool, determining the format for measurements, developing an initial item pool to be reviewed by experts, considering inclusion of validation items, administer items to development to a development sample, and finally evaluating the items. We followed all these steps straightforward. So in order to establish the item pool, we organized a focus group interview with 7 students, randomly selected, of course. The students were asked about their reasons and motivations for learning English. And this interview lasted like 20 minutes. And we used content analysis technique and blind analysis procedure. And we compiled 22 items as the initial form of our scale. And following that, we had to ensure the content and face validity. So we sent the 22 initial version of the scale to 5 medical doctors. And we provided a scale like relevant, needs minor revision, needs some revision, and not relevant. So the items were evaluated by the medical doctors. And after their feedback, we calculated the content validity ratio with the formula you can see on the screen. And finally, after the feedback, we had to extract 6 inappropriate items from the scale. And after 22 items of the initial form, now we have 16 items scale. All right, here's the data analysis. First of all, we started with exploratory factor analysis, which I will mention as EFA. Okay, so we used principal component analysis, and we used direct oblivion with Kaiser normalization rotation method. And we find the adequacy of the sample size. The numbers, the calculations were acceptable. And to test if the correlations between the items of the scale were large enough to perform the EFA, we also used Barrett's test of sphericity, and we obtained, again, sufficient values. Okay, for the first factor, we found 4.22. For the second factor, 3.91. And for the last factor, we found 3.61. And these in total explain, these factors was calculated as in total variance, like 64.62% of the total variance. It's a quite high number. For exploratory factor analysis, we calculated commonalities, and 2 items were removed since they had communality values below 0.40, and these two items are I learn English to specialize in medicine and I learn English to pursue an academic career. We excluded these items. Here is the scrape plot for the number of components in the principal component analysis. And here is the factor loadings for rotated exploratory factor analysis. As I have mentioned, we had 3 components, 5 in the first group, 5 in the second group, and 4 in the third as the third factor. And in order to ensure the reliability, the item total correlation was also calculated, and statistically significant correlation values were obtained in the same direction between all item total values for dimensions, as you can see on the table. And after that, we carried out a confirmatory factor analysis, which I'll mention as CFA, to test the validity and accuracy of the structure obtained from EFA. You can see the fit indices for confirmatory factor analysis models. So 1 asterisk is for good fit and 2 asterisks are for acceptable, and you see we have both good fit and acceptable numbers as a result of calculation. And for internal consistency and discriminant validity, we carried out statistical processes and we found Cronbach alphas, composite reliabilities, AVE values, discriminant validity, means, and standard deviations, which suggest, all of them suggest us sufficient statistical calculations. Here is our path diagram for confirmatory factor analysis of professional language learning scale. As you can see, there are 3 factors: intrinsic, integrative, and extrinsic. For discriminant validity, we also calculated the heterotrait monotrait ratio, HDMT, and we found that the motivational factors of the scale have discriminant validity. And as for reliability, of course, we carried out a number of tests. The most important one is, of course, 2-case tests for non-additivity. And we carried out Friedman's chi-square, and we obtained sufficient calculations here again. But for the whole scale, we found that the whole scale was not additive. All right, here is the conclusion of our study. Although language learning motivation of EFL learners are usually assessed by a number of common scales developed by various researchers, this study puts more emphasis on the importance of exploring foreign language learning motives from a professional perspective. As a result of an EFA, a 3-factor instrument for evaluating professional foreign language learning motives found to explain 64.62% of the total variance. So we can say that we have at the end 14 items and 3 main categories scale, like intrinsic motivation, 5 items. For the extrinsic motivation scale, we had 5 items again, and finally for the integrative motivation, we have actually 4 items. So the findings also suggested that the sample size was appropriate to test the validity of the scale, and we found the internal consistency for 3 factors as 0.84. So all these values suggest that PLLMS can be utilized as a valid and a reliable tool to identify foreign language learning motivations of medical students. Also, the scale is practical to be implemented with its 14 items structure. Thanks for listening.